Now, I talked about the like unsolved deaths and self deletions in my last podcast recording. Now, this time I'm talking about the people who were actually murdered. They lost their lives at the hands of other people. And the first one that I can recall is a man named Paul. Now, he was sort of good friends with a next door neighbor. I mean, we thought they were good friends. Paul, he was married to a woman from Germany because he had served in the military, and they had two daughters together. And there was a woman who lived she was across the street from this sort of house that was like a two-way house. There was an apartment in the front, and then there was another apartment in the back. The apartment in the front had an attic, and various people had lived there over the years, including my cousin and his mom and grandmother. And I think they were living there at this time, if I'm not mistaken. And this this couple from New York, and they never let you forget it, just like a lot of people from New York and other big cities will never let you forget it, or from Texas for that matter. And I don't remember the wife's name. I want to say her name was Joanne, but I don't think it was. It was maybe Francine. I'm not sure actually. But his name was Caesar, the man, and he was a big jolly guy, kind of fat really. And he seemed nice. He put some arcade games upstairs in the extra room. It was a 2-bedroom apartment, but he put like Mrs. Pac-Man and Donkey Kong and some other game like Asteroids up there, and I think a pinball machine, if I'm not mistaken. And the kids, especially the boys, they like to go up there and play the games. And he downstairs in their living room, they had like a little section where they sold candy. And it was set up like a store, but it was only candy and fruit roll-ups, which were becoming popular then. Granola bars, like light and crunchy, and granola clusters, and candy bars, like Summit bars, which they don't make anymore. And I didn't like them at the time because they were sort of similar to Kit Kats, and Kit Kats had never been my favorite. But I grew to like them because he undersold the stores. If the stores charged, 5 cents more, he was going to go 5 cents less. And I remember we would go over there by Now and Laters, and I would buy these Jolly Rancher sticks, which were like fire sticks. I love those things. And he sold sodas as well. And we would go over there all the time. And it turned out he had borrowed some money from Paul, and he didn't want to pay it back. And it was not even a big amount, $50 to $100. So anyway, Paul ended up missing. His wife was looking for him. Other people were looking for him. And the woman, I forgot to, I got sidetracked. But the woman across the road from this house, she was like related to Paul. I think she might have been his aunt, if I'm not mistaken. And anyway, everybody was looking for him, over there looking for him, wondering where he was. And my brother's childhood friend had actually overheard Caesar and Paul in an argument over this money, this piddling amount of money. And his wife, Caesar's wife, actually threatened this 12-year-old kid. And he was afraid to even come over to our house. He would sneak up there like at night. And he told us about it. And we were like, something's wrong with that picture. Caesar must have had something to do with this. Anyway, Paul was found murdered in an industrial area not far from a shopping center in the northern part of my hometown. He was behind these like trailers that people would empty and put things in up there, these warehouses near these railroad tracks. And I don't know how long he had been dead, but it had to have been like 2 or 3 days. And of course everyone was looking at Caesar, at least we were, and he had the nerve to come over to our house one morning, and my grandmother let him in, and I'll never forget, she offered him some coffee, and he was drinking it from the the coffee cup, and his hand was shaking. I'm surprised he didn't spill coffee all over the floor. And he was like, I didn't do anything to Paul. He was my friend. Why would he come over there and tell us that? Anyway, my mother's fiance at the time, they didn't end up getting married though, but he called Crime Stoppers and reported it. And I don't know what happened, but Caesar went crazy. He was driving his van all over the city, and he went to some guy's house, and when the guy came to the door, he shot the guy in the stomach. Fortunately, this man lived, but he wound up getting caught and eventually was convicted of murder. And my mom's fiance wound up getting a reward from Crime Stoppers for calling that in. So we had a good Christmas that year. And we actually moved from that area. We had already been looking for another place, and we were glad to leave. And my brother was like, what if they come after us? But, you know, the idiot ended up getting caught. So, you know, that was that. And probably, I don't know if it was that same year or maybe the next year, but I believe it was the same year. This girl I had known from school wound up getting murdered by her ex when she broke up with him. He actually shot inside her bedroom where she and her sister shared, and shot her in the head, and she died. And I was so shocked when I found out about it, because I was like, oh my gosh, I knew Rhonda. And it just, you know, stuck with me over the years because she was young. She was only, I think, 14 when she was killed. And I remember seeing her at our county fair with this guy. And he was older. He was probably 20 or 21. And the reason she broke up with him was because I think he was becoming like stalkerish and abusive and controlling, and the parents wanted her away from him because they felt she was too young to be with him, which she was. I don't know why they allowed it in the first place. If they had not, she would still probably be here today. And it was just a shock to me, because she had been such a, you know, nice, pretty girl, you know. I remember the boys used to try to get after her, but a lot of times she just wouldn't even speak to them. She would just come and sit by me on the bus and ignore them. And she'd say, you don't mind if I sit here? I said, no, I don't mind. You know, because I was a quiet person. I would just sit and stare out the window. And I guess she preferred that to these boys trying to rag on her. And, you know, I was just so shocked when I realized it was her. Because at first I didn't know, and then I saw a picture, and I was just like, wow, I can't believe it. Can't believe Rhonda's dead. She didn't even get to, you know, fulfill her life. You know, it was just such a sad situation, and I really hated it. I hated it for the family. Even though I didn't know them, it was just, oh my goodness. I just, you know, at that age, you don't really think about death. I thought about it because my grandfather had passed, and we were close, and you know, his death depressed me for a very long time. And then my grandmother passed, and I was depressed about that. But they weren't murdered. And, you know, it was just a shock, really. Just a terrible thing. And then, a couple of years later, a friend of my mother's was murdered. Now, she was fooling around with another woman's man. I think it was the woman's husband, as a matter of fact. And she was always borrowing this like mini dress from my mom, which I liked. I liked this mini dress, but I would never have worn anything like that. And it was my mom's. And my mom was like, you know, she might well just keep this dress. She's always borrowing. And then she would borrow it to go and see this man. And she wound up being murdered in it. So the dress was kept as evidence. The woman caught them together. I don't know what she did to the man, but she shot my mama's friend, Darlene, in the neck, and she bled out. And I remember it was in the papers and on the news, and it was just such a shock. I mean, she wasn't even 30 years old. And she had a daughter that she obviously, you know, had when she was 14, because the daughter was 14 and she was 28. And, you know, yes, she did not lead an exemplary lifestyle. A lot of people don't. Look at all those celebrities out there. They don't lead exemplary, admirable lifestyles. And, wow. But sometimes it's like where you live, it takes you out. And fooling around with someone else's like spouse is just not a good thing. Even if you're fooling around with somebody's like ex, sometimes they could go off. I've seen so many shows on TV about that. You just never know how people are going to react. And this woman reacted in that way. And even though she went to prison for it, I guess she felt like it was worth it. But it's never, worth it. Just walk away. And I don't know why Darlene couldn't just find her own man. I mean, there's so many men out there. Why do you have to fool around with someone else's? I mean, there are a lot of people out there who are single. Even then, and now there are people who are single and they want to be with someone. And people choose to go with someone who's married. I remember I was dating a guy, and I don't know, he seemed secretive, and I was thinking, why is he so secretive? Like, I know he lived with his son, and he never introduced me to him. And someone said, well, that's strange, because why would he? It's like he's trying to hide you. He never took me to his house. We would always go just somewhere else, and then he would just want to drive, like far away, so we can, well, let's just spend the night here, and we'll get a hotel room. I was like, this guy must be married. So I stopped talking to him. I didn't even tell him why, I just stopped. And I remember he called and was like, why do you never text me or call me anymore? And I said, I've been busy. I just left it at that and just never did anything with them. I'm not fooling around with any married men and men who are involved with women. I'm not going out like that, because it just doesn't end well. It really doesn't. So anyway, my aunt, the same aunt whose teenage pal wound up deceased, murdered actually, and off this certain roadway. She had another friend, and this friend was on drugs really bad. She was basically what people call a crackhead, and she had this horrible attitude. I mean, she was one of those people who was loud, just in your face, and she was always stealing things and then trying to trade them for drugs. And apparently she ticked off the wrong person. She said the wrong thing to the wrong person, and that person deleted her. They used a blade, and my aunt was like sad about it, because she felt like, she said, I know Barb had a mouth on her, but she didn't deserve to go out like that. And it was like sort of shocking, because I remember she was like being nice to me. She actually gave me some nail polish she had stolen. It was that kind, had like glittery like stuff in it. It was really pretty. And she was like, here, you can put this on your nails. And she'll ask me, did I want any like lipstick and stuff? And she said, I get that for you next time. And I said, okay. But there was never a next time, because she wound up murdered. And it was a shock to the family. Really. Maybe it's not as shocking as Rhonda's death was to me, or Darlene's was to my mom, or Paul's was to the family. But it was still a shock. Although I'm sure a lot of people looked at it like, well, she was just a crackhead. She was a thief. But, that you just can't say things like that. It wasn't that guy's, it wasn't his, authority to, be take someone's life. He didn't have that authority. Really, only God has that right, that authority. Although I will beg to differ when it comes to certain types of individuals, like people who hurt children, like take their lives and do the bad things to them. They don't really, gosh, I hate to be so judgmental, but they really shouldn't be around other people. Anyway, there was a woman I knew named Gloria. Now, she had her issues. She had problems. She had been, molested by her father. Speaking of child molesters, she'd been molested by him, so she ran away because her mother didn't believe her. She ran away at age 10. and was on the streets actually. And she, she was a white woman from Virginia, and these black people took her in because they felt sorry for her. And she's about age of like 12 or 13 or 14. She started, selling her body for money and everything. I don't know if she ever became a substance abuser, but she, got into that lifestyle, everything. And so she wound up getting AIDS. So when I knew her, she did have AIDS. And, she seemed like a nice person. I only knew her for a couple of months, but, she was just nice, I thought. I really did. And a couple of, well, it wasn't really a couple of years. It was like maybe early last year. I just Googled her name for some reason. And I found out that she actually had been, she died as a result of being restrained for 30 days, just strapped down to this bed in a mental hospital in Virginia. And there was like this whole thing about it. And it was her because it was her last name. Her last name was kind of unusual because she had actually changed one letter in her last name so she wouldn't have the same last name as her father. And plus they mentioned the fact that she had AIDS. I don't know what that had to do with anything, if the state actually killed her. But, her family was actually suing this mental hospital. And they said she had to be restrained like that because she was violent. And I was like, what happened in the few years since I had last seen her to make her violent? Because when I knew her, she wasn't. And I don't know if it was because of AIDS or something else. Or maybe I just never saw that side of her, but they claimed she had to be restrained all the time. But to keep someone restrained for over 30 days, and she wound up dying because of her organs had, become, I don't know, messed up in some kind of way from being restrained to the bed like that. But they pretty much killed her. And it just threw me for a loop. I was just so shocked when I read that. I really was. I was shocked. I would not have been shocked if I had read that she had passed away from AIDS. If I had, but to find this out, it really bothered me. I just kept thinking about it. And I still think about it, obviously, just like I think about the rest of them. But it was just like, wow, to go out like that. You're in a place that they're supposed to be helping you, and they're not. It was terrible. I felt so bad for her. But what really angered me is that her family, like her mom and everything, they wanted to sue the hospital. It's like you didn't even believe your daughter when she told you at age 10 that she was being molested by her dad. You chose him over your daughter. And now that she's dead, and you can feel like you can get some money out of it, it just really, kind of ticked me off. It felt like she was like thrown away, like trash or something. Just terrible. Terrible, terrible, terrible. I feel bad about these things. And I have to pray about it because, I didn't know Gloria that it happened to her. But I knew her, this was like 1991. And when she passed away like that, it was, I think, 1996. So it was like a couple of years later, and I hadn't seen her, since. And I would think about it for some reason over the years, from time to time. It's like I would think about Paul and Rhonda and Darlene and Barb. And it was just like, wow. Incredible. I just thank God that I'm here. And nothing like that has ever happened to me. I've come close to some situations, and I'll talk about that. But, to go out the way these people did, because someone owes you money and they don't want to pay you and you want your money back, or because you break up someone because this person's too old for you and they're controlling and abusive, or just bad situations like mouthing off at someone and they don't like it, or being with someone else's significant other, or just being supposedly aggressive. Yeah, it was just wow. Wow. But anyway, I'm going to discuss these other deaths coming up, and these all took place in California. That's where I'm going to start because there's like over 100 of them, and some of them were overdoses, some were murders, there were suicides. The others were just like accidents, and there might have been a few that were natural causes, but many were just like, wow, that could have been prevented. And I'm going to talk about those in a later show.